Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox and thanks for logging on. Today we have the shootout of 2019. On the left, the Omega Seamaster Aqua Terra, last refreshed for 2017 and new for 2019. On the right, the Grand Seiko Elegance Spring Drive SBGA407, already nicknamed the Skyflake. Both in stainless steel. Let the games begin. I should also mention that if you want to buy either of these watches, email tmosso at thewatchbox.com, your direct line, a service line for this channel and the watches you see here. So let's start with the Omega. Refreshing our memory, because that Seiko has been all over watch forums over the last few months. This is a timepiece that's a bit underappreciated. When the Aqua Terra first came out in 2003, it was in a lot of ways the successor to the old Seamaster 120, a light-duty sports watch that was more of a surf and turf, water-resistant all-arounder than the hardcore diving-centric sports watches in the general Seamaster line, and this watch continues in that tradition. 41 millimeters in stainless steel. You can see on my wrist, it's an elegant watch. And that's most apropos in a contest against a watch that is formerly from the Grand Seiko Elegance collection. Now, it's not terribly thick at 13.5 millimeters, and it's got relatively short cropped lugs on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist. You can see it spans a reasonable 47.5 millimeters, and it has a surprisingly traditional 20 millimeter spacing between the lugs. You can see the watch has a nice, handsome stance. It is a little bit more unitary, which is to say a bit more of a solid ingot or block in both appearance and feel than the Grand Seiko. That's compounded by the use of a special strap that's designed to conform to the case flank and close off the gap between strap and case. You can see there's a little intermediate link that helps to bridge the gap, and then there's a crosshatch pattern, a contrasting stitch. It's all vulcanized rubber, and you can see on the underside the same contrasting stitch. There is a full deploying clasp, which is a combination of satin and polish with a twin trigger element, so it can't accidentally pop open. Then a clever minderless system that allows you to tuck the strap in, tuck it into the little retaining lips, and then once sized, all of the excess length hides underneath the strap, so it's a very clean look. The case band hasn't changed much. This general lyre style lug that turns inward and outward at its tips has been around since the mid-60s on Seamasters and Speedmasters. You can see what was different for 2017 was that the satin finished longitudinal surface was deprived of its one-time lobes or its countersink, the sort of crown guard that you found on the Aqua Terra series. Now the crown is a little bit more conical, wider at its outer circumference to ease winding. The dial is handsome. For 2017, the teak deck concept, introduced in the late 2000s, now runs from 9 to 3 rather than 12 to 6. We have high-quality dial with all applique indices, Omega logo, and Omega marquee. The date moved from 3 down to 6 o'clock, and you can see use of cyan blue for the quarter Arabics of the seconds and minutes track outboard. Now, the watch is easy to read day or night. I appreciate that the seconds hand is also loomed. If you check the subsidiary setting modes, let me engage that properly, there is a time zone function, so you can actually adjust the hour hand independently while the watch keeps keeping time. And as you can see, you can jump forward or backwards across the international date line. Pull it all out, you get the hacking seconds or stop seconds mode. A screw down crown here, you won't find that on the Grand Seiko. 150 meters water resistant. Let's pop the strap out of the retainer system and take a look at the case back. The case back is handsome. Cote de Genève and arabesque, machine finished to be sure, but well designed and attractive in its execution. Twin mainspring barrels for even torque release past 24 hours. That's a problem single barrel movements have. Not so here. There's no real drop off in amplitude after a day or 2 days. 60-hour power reserve, a full balance bridge and free sprung for shock resistance with a silicone hairspring for anti-magnetism. Now the watch features the Daniels coaxial escapement, and it is a Métas chronometer, so cased up, not a bare movement test, and a 6-position test rather than a 5-position test as with the COSC. Still meeting the COSC tests now. We add water resistance, anti-magnetism, winding efficiency, and power reserve. That is what the Métas or master chronometer test of this caliber 8900 achieves. Let's talk about the Grand Seiko. New to the scene, this is a watch that is a variation on an existing dial, and if you'd asked me coming into the 2019 model year what the watch industry absolutely did not need, I would have said a variation on an existing dial, albeit in blue. We've got a new blue dial variant every 5 minutes, maybe every 4 minutes it seems. However, this watch turned out to be a revelation and a revolution. A timepiece that works as a dress watch and as a sports watch. It's anything but a blue dial clone of the the Snowflake. This is the SBGA407. I want to make some distinctions here. Different from the Snowflake, it features the Elegance case inspired by the original 1960 Grand Seiko 3180, the first Grand Seiko watch. This is not the 44GS polyhedron angular case that you get with the Snowflake. Moreover, this is steel, still tin plate Zaratsu finished, so the entire case black polished against a tin milling wheel by an artisan holding the case directly against the milling surface. But it is a very different, more classical shape than the Snowflake. Alligator leather strap here rather than the rubber on the Omega, cab on the underside. The clasp is very different, and as you can see, they run the table with the vintage themes, with the vintage Grand Seiko logo on the vintage inspired watch. There is a minder in steel, which is appreciated, but it doesn't tuck the excess length underneath the strap as the Omega does, and it needs minder loops as a result to keep track of any excess length. Now, while the watch has a push-down crown, it does have 100-meter water resistance, so with 100-meter water resistance, put this on a water-resistant band, this is a swimmable watch. On the dial, oh, this dial. Over half a dozen steps, starting with stamping and ending with lacquering to create the snowdrift form of the dial. The textured, rusticated dial, originally inspired by the northern Japan wintertime snowdrifts outside of Grand Seiko's studios. The dial is of exceptional quality, not just because of the multi-step snowflake form in blue, but because all of the dial furniture, the logo, the indices, the hands, are micrometrically finished on a diamond-tipped tool manually by artisans who only create these parts. The Lancet-style counterweight seconds hand is actually fired steel, not chemically dyed. So the quality of this dial is as good as anything in the mass market. I would even say it's right up with Rolex, possibly even above, as the absolute standard, objectively and subjectively the best in series production watches. You cannot find a higher quality dial on a watch priced at under $50,000. Now, if we turn everything over, you can see this one's still remarkably fresh. This is the 9R65 caliber, 3-day power reserve, spring drive, stop seconds. It also features a quick set date and a unidirectional governing wheel. Automatic spring drive arrived in 2005, hit the ground running, and it never stopped. A system capable of achieving plus or minus 15 seconds a month of accuracy, on average 1 second a day per Grand Seiko. The watch has a technology, being able to wake up and utilize a quartz oscillator to regulate it, that the Omega cannot possibly match. Remember, the Omega is to the 3159 timing standards, which is -4 plus 6 seconds per day. The Omega is better than those standards, but it's not as good as spring drive. It is powered by a spring. There are no motors. There is no capacitor. There is no battery system. So all of the energy is spring energy before it's converted to kinetic energy, and then a small amount of electric energy and electromagnetic back force that governs the unidirectional governing wheel. As a result, you have hands that are in fact driven by the spring itself for a soulful mechanical quartz hybrid, and you can see that smooth sweep of the spring drive seconds distinctive of these spring drive movements. Omega with its coaxial chronometer is impressive. It's not this accurate, not even close. So let's talk about the advantages, starting with the Omega. So compared to the brand new and red hot Skyflake, what does the old Aqua Terra have going for it? Quite a bit, starting with professed quality. I always use the warranty a brand offers as a benchmark of its confidence in its own product. With Grand Seiko, you get 3 years, but with Omega, you get 5. Also, a little bit of tech and spec on this watch's side. It is effectively an amagnetic watch. I wouldn't operate the Grand Seiko around an MRI. This should be good to go. Plus, with a screw-down crown and 150-meter water resistance, this watch has an objective technical advantage over the Grand Seiko. You can't do that with the Grand Seiko, nor do you boast 150 meters of security or the peace of mind of a screw-down crown. A loomed dial, you get that with the Aqua Terra. You don't get that with the Skyflake. That makes a difference. For those of you who are going to make this your only watch, advantage Omega. Let's talk a little bit about dial symmetry. I think personally this is one of the masterpieces in modern dial design. That said, some prefer bilateral symmetry, and you really can cut this dial down the middle and it's identical on both sides. For some, that will be a more pleasing look. Do you want different case sizes? Do you want different dial colors? Do you want bracelets? Do you want leather or rubber strap options? You've got them with the Aqua Terra. There are other Elegance collection Grand Seiko watches, but they will not be the Skyflake, whereas you can still very much have this basic Aqua Terra, albeit in many different forms to customize to suit. I'll also shout out the fact that this is a watch that is cheaper, newer, used. This watch costs $5,800 new, and I've actually seen them selling for more than $6 pre-owned. This is a watch that costs $5,500 new, and I've seen them selling for around $3 pre-owned. So on a cost basis, new or used, the Omega gives you the advantage. So let's talk about the advantages of the 407. The SBGA 407 has a lot of them, starting with the fact that right now, if you were to buy this watch and then sell it a few months later, you'd probably lose no money on it. Also, with a 72-hour power reserve and the indefatigable accuracy of Spring Drive, this watch has both more complications with its power reserve indicator and a longer power reserve with greater accuracy along the way than the Omega. The coax is mighty, Spring Drive is more so. Let's talk about rarity and elegance. Any Spring Drive Grand Seiko with a hand-finished case and dial is going to be scarcer than any Omega Seamaster variant in steel. That's a simple fact. If you don't want to see your watch on someone else's wrist, get this one. I'll also shout out the fact that not only is the dial exquisite, but the case is hand-finished, and tangibly so, in a way that only the finest Swiss watches are. You're going to have to pay well into 5 figures to get this level of finishing on a Swiss watch case. Here, $5,800 gets you in the door, a hand-finished watch about its dial and about its case, inside and out. One of the all-time great dials. Originally released in 2008, I believe, the Snowflake, updated for 2017 with a new Grand Seiko-centric dial, is one of the most famous brand-defining dial designs in the industry. This is unarguably a worthwhile addition, and many will insist a more attractive variant. Advantage Grand Seiko. Finally, easier fit. This watch, 40.2 millimeters. We should talk about the fit of this one. 40.2 millimeters in diameter, 13.2 millimeters thick, and 48.2 millimeters from lug to lug, but practically speaking, because of the unimpeded motion of the strap, it wears as a much smaller watch on the wrist. So if you want greater discretion as well as better ergonomics on a small wrist, it's going to be Advantage Grand Seiko. 20 millimeter spacing between the straps, so that's very traditional in its own right. Let's talk about my ultimate choice. Between the two watches, you can't make a bad choice. They're both great watches. Neither one of these has a fatal flaw, but I'm going to say that I was sold on the soul of the Grand Seiko SBGA 407. I first saw it in an airport shop in Dubai. What a way to make introductions, and it made a first impression to remember. This is a timepiece that has soul, hand-finished charisma. It's redolent of the spirit and values of the Grand Seiko brand, both aesthetically and technically. It does have objective technical advantages over the Omega, and I would even say on the basis of style and sophistication, this is a look that's going to stand the test of time, whereas, well, there's a reason Omega refreshes the Aqua Terra every couple of years. I think this will look just as good in the year 2050. This, I think, will be more of a vintage flavor, a watch you wear for its vintage irony, perhaps, and this will be a watch you wear for its enduring beauty. So between the two, again, no wrong answer, but I'm putting my money on the Grand Seiko, figuratively and literally. Let me know in the description boxes below or in the chat boxes below, which one of these do you choose?